the devil wants to convince us that we should just bury everything, and if nobody finds out, then it's not a problem.
Being known is like, it can be uncomfortable, but it's way better than convincing yourself that you're messing up, or like people aren't gonna like accept what you're saying, or
And for the first few months of college, I was alone. I isolated, and I was alone and busy, and it was not good. It wasn't until I was broken that I started to actually grow and seek all of those good things out.
All right, welcome back to Iron Sharpens Iron. And today my guests are some of my favorite people. We have Lex, Pastor Brennan's daughter. We have Jessa, Pastor Jim's daughter. And Jayce, Pastor Jim's son. I'm really excited to have you guys here. And there is a theme going on here. You guys are all pastors' kids. Although for a season, I guess it would just be missionary kids, and I wanted to ask you guys here today so we could have that conversation. And then I want to have the conversation of you guys are all in college, and at least from my perspective, walking well with Jesus. And so I want to go, what does that look like? Because that's a transition from high school to college that a lot of people fall apart and their faith doesn't quite transition. And so I just want to probe that a little bit. But let's start with the first piece. How has it been different for you, or what have you observed that was different for you being a pastor's kid?
I guess in my experience, like when I was born up until I was 5 years old, my dad was one of the youth and like administrative pastors at our church in Michigan. And that was, I guess, a lot more subtle just because it was a lot smaller of a church, and it honestly kind of felt like everyone was in ministry, like everyone was doing it together, but we lived kind of farther away. And so it'd be like every Sunday, it's like 6 a.m, we're getting in the car in our pajamas and like heading to church, and like we're the first people there. And I just thought that was like the coolest thing ever. Just like, oh, okay, we're just the first people here. That's awesome. But I guess like after we transitioned out of that, we moved away from that church and moved to a different part of the state and kind of stepped out of ministry for a time. And that lasted up until I was maybe like 10 years old, where my dad was working corporately full time, which was fine. It was a good season, but then stepping back into that, I think that's where like I noticed like the major difference, because the church, I guess, was bigger, and like seeing him go from, oh, like Mr. Corporate, we're just doing like all this Target stuff, and then it being like, now you're taking on this church. And we were in the old building, but it was right as we had bought like the next two kind of sections of the building. Like we had the whole place for the first time. So it was a lot of, like we're there on the weekends to renovate, and we're like, there's a thriving kids ministry and women's ministry, and like getting to be involved in all of that, like kind of stepping into that was a big transition in a way, and kind of different from what it was when I was really little. Like finally, I guess more being like, okay, like we're in it, we're trying to make things happen. But yeah, that was, I guess.
So how did that transition affect you personally? Like what were some personal things for that?
So honestly, that transition was honestly one of my favorite times of my life. And at the beginning of it, I didn't really know why. And like, as I've kind of gotten older, like getting to realize like what was going on, I definitely feel like as that transition happened, it was almost kind of like stepping out of survival mode in a way, like with just the corporate job that my dad was in, that was just like becoming too much, and that put a lot of strain on him. And then having a negative experience with some leadership that church did not feel like a safe place for a while. And that was hard. And then it's like, once my dad became the pastor and we started like stepping more into that, it honestly, like church felt like a safe place. It felt like just like breathe and like I didn't know that at the time, but like now being older and kind of like, you know, connecting all the dots and being like, that was a good thing.
Yeah.
It was a good time. Yeah.
How about you guys? Early ministries, being a kid and stuff.
I feel like I didn't really notice any difference. I just thought that was how everyone lived. It was extra time for me to run around and play when I was really little, because I remember when you're the youth pastor in Oki, or like even in Germany, like I didn't really know what it was you were doing. I was just like, oh, I'm going to have fun. I'm going to run around the building and throw darts and just have fun with like my brothers and like our cousins and other friends. And I feel like for a long time until I got older, I didn't really realize what it was that you and Mom did. And how you guys were serving people in the church and just working as missionaries. I just thought it was normal, but it was also, once I started to get older, like in Oki, seeing you guys serve in ministry and in the church is what made me become a Christian. Because I don't remember if I ever actually like prayed with you and Mom to accept Christ. But the one moment I do remember is that every single night you guys would pray with me before I went to bed. And I would pray with you. I'd be like, okay, Lord, like, please help me sleep well and like help me do these things. But one night I think I was about 7, and I was just in my bed thinking like, you know, every night I pray to this God that I don't know, that I don't believe in. Like, why am I doing that? Like, I remember thinking, like, my parents have sacrificed so much to serve this God, and they believe in him, and they're doing everything they can to serve other people and to help others to believe in him. And I thought that was so strange that you guys would do that, that you would serve this unknown being that I had no relationship with. And it was that moment that I decided I wanted to follow Christ. I'm like, okay, I am going to choose to believe in you, God. I'm going to dedicate my life to you and follow you. And I want to know you more so I can understand why it is that my parents are living this way. So it was seeing you guys in ministry that made me want to follow God and believe in him.
Those are deep thoughts for a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
Jayce, what was kind of your experience growing up a little bit?
Kind of like Jessa said, at the youngest age, you're oblivious to all the things that go on. It's normal, or, you know, it's just an opportunity for extra fun, having, you know, people come over for meeting type things, or youth group, trying to sneak in to play games with them when you're not necessarily supposed to. But yeah, I think being involved, the opportunities to be involved in ministry helped build my faith. And there was times where it's just, I'm kind of involved, you know, just on the side. And there's times where you like invite us specifically to be more involved. And I think those helped a lot. I think one thing is, for ministry specifically, moving a lot is a big thing for a kid. I'm thankful that, like, you know, middle school and high school was kind of all in the same place. But yeah, I mean, younger, moving away, it was a little bit tough. Like, all right, got to say goodbye to friends, got to start anew. But it was still also exciting. Like, okay, like, new place, what's next for me? I think a little bit, another thing is being a pastor's kid in general, there's a little bit of an expectation, like, you know, you got to be the pastor's kid. And in my situation, that expectation wasn't put on me from other people, because everybody was like in ministry, went to like a Christian school. Everybody's kind of a pastor's kid or ministry kid. But that expectation was, I put a little bit on myself, like, not always in a bad way, but just like, okay, there's some things where, like, if I'm struggling, you know, it would be a wise thing to go and talk with you about it. But like, I want to talk with my peers first, or there's some things that I just, I'd be like, okay, I'd prefer not to discuss this with my parents, but I'm still going to address it. So it wasn't always unhealthy, but like, yeah, that piece of a little bit scared to be a little bit real with the things that I wanted to go through. I wanted to go through them with other people rather than.
What was behind that? Was it a protective thing or?
I don't know. I mean, at its base, like, I feel like it's just, I wasn't as comfortable that way, but I think part of it too is just like, you guys, like, for the things that I'm going through, you guys kind of had it figured out. And so I want to talk to somebody who's going through it with me more than I wanted to talk with somebody who's going to give me the answer or something like that.
Yeah, that's fair. What was some of those, like, the pastor kid expectations for you guys as you experienced it?
I definitely agree with what you were saying, that I don't feel like anyone pushed it on me. It was more just me kind of in my own head being like making up a standard that I had to follow because of like what I thought would happen. Like if I did something that other people were like, oh, that's not very pastor's kid like, and it's like, what even is that, But I remember there would be times where I guess it was my parents would have conversations with me where it was like, we're called to ministry. We're called like to this walk with the Lord. And because of that, there was just some things that they were convicted about that was like, okay, maybe we're not going to do this. And that, like, I totally agreed with that. It was like, there wasn't anything wrong with that. But I feel like sometimes I like kind of took it to like a bit of an extreme, like myself. I remember there was one time where there was like, I talked about like something that, like a book series that I had liked. And it was a book series that like I told one of my friends about it, and then their parents got like kind of upset that like I was talking about it. And like, it was just this whole thing that like I look back on it now and it was kind of ridiculous, but it very
but at
much.
The time it's like, oh
right,
no, what did I
like,
just do?
Yeah, I'm like 12 years old and I'm like, oh my gosh, like people are gonna freak out about this. And like, it wasn't a big deal, but it like that really kind of like solidified like something inside of me where it was just like, okay, like we have to keep everything under wraps. It's just like, like almost like you couldn't, what I convinced myself of was that if I was struggling with something, that wasn't something that should really be out in the open. Like that was something that just for the sake of everything and everyone involved, that it was like, okay, let's keep that under wraps. Or like if there was something that I did or, that like other people, like I was scared, like maybe they wouldn't agree with it. It's just like never talk about that. And that was never something that my parents pushed on me.
Right.
Like just getting that out of the way. But it definitely was a thing. My dad says something that it's like the enemy wants to convince you that like no one's gonna like accept you. Like you're the only person going through what you're going through. Like you're so bad, you're so terrible. And I definitely feel like it was part of that where I was just like, okay, people are gonna judge you. Like let's just keep everything together. Yeah. So that did take a while to kind of, unlearn in a way, but realizing that like not just pastors' kids, like a lot of people deal with that too.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think that's a common human Christian experience, but I think it gets highlighted.
Yeah.
There.
Exactly.
And so you were nodding your head while she was talking. Like what you were saying, is there elements of that in what you were saying too? Or?
Yeah, part of it. I said sometimes it's not always unhealthy, but sometimes my suppression was like the same thing. Like,
yeah,
I don't want my parents to know what I'm going through or people what I'm going through. And so I don't know. And that could be amplified a little bit by the fact that, my parents are, in this ministry and stuff. And so I feel like I know that your response would be loving, but at the same time, I'm like, I just can't do it,
Yeah.
And usually for me, that would be like, okay, well, I still need to take it to somebody. And so I would take it to somebody, but I couldn't I couldn't bring it to light to you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you identifying with what they're saying? All right. So tell me what is different for you?
Like I've always struggled with perfectionism, but not as a result of being a pastor's kid or missionary kid. I never felt like it was, how do I explain it? I never felt like anyone put extra pressure on me to do something, or I would be like, oh, like I shouldn't do that because it'll get viewed as the wrong way and it'll like cause a bad reputation for my parents or anything. Like I would put pressure on myself I wanted to do the best that I could. And often that played out academically, like in the school that I went to in high school and middle school. But I feel like I don't know, it didn't feel the same as that. And I would struggle, but I'm also like a huge verbal processor. And as much as I might try to not let people know what I'm thinking or struggling with, it's always very visible to everyone around me. And I feel like whenever there was something, maybe one or two things I wouldn't talk to you guys about, but like everything else you guys knew, and I would bring it up. I may not know how to work through it and how to like kind of get out of the rut of certain emotions. But I feel like I always felt like I could go to you guys, and I would. I feel like you guys kind of knew everything I was going through, and I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine. And not everybody's experience is going to be the same.
Yeah.
So on that point with you two, what recommendations would you guys give for somebody to move from that guarded place? Because as your parents, we believe vulnerability is super important. As I work with your dad, he believes vulnerability is super important for our spiritual walk, our development. Mm-hmm. So how would what words of encouragement would you have? Like what helped you move to, like you had vulnerability with peers, but still the idea is we want a bigger group of vulnerability people that we're with. And so what are some words of encouragement that you guys would have?
I guess I would say, like, I don't really know how to say this, but so much of my experience was like freaking out about like, what if people think this, what if people think that? And like come to find out no one actually cared. Like no one cared except like, and if people did care, then that was a them problem, like that's, So I guess it was like, if I could give advice to another pastor's kid, is like being known is like, it can be uncomfortable, but it's way better than convincing yourself that you're messing up or like people aren't gonna like accept what you're saying or, So I would say just find people that you feel like that you want to talk to about things, because there are so many people who probably would love to be willing to. Yeah.
Yeah. And so even like in the context of our church, one of the things that I love is there's a lot of people in our church that just love people well. Yeah. And just want to be a part of their life. And that's what you got to take a risk. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would you add anything?
I think for me, it's just like, you just got to get past that hurdle. Yeah. Like you were saying,
30 seconds of courage.
30 seconds of courage. Yeah. I mean, but like what Lex was saying, like the devil wants to convince us that we should just bury everything, and if nobody finds out, then it's not a problem. But, the darkness can't hide in the light, and you need to take things to the light. And so, while like for me, like you can take it to your friends and that's a good thing. I think another step, like I'm missing out on some of the wisdom of somebody who's, gone through those things already. Yeah. And, who's living in the same house and who knows me in a different way. So yeah, just got to get over that hurdle and you got to take it to them. And I think, as a younger me, I need to understand that like, it's going to work out. And like, there's gonna, some of that stuff, like, I'd bring it up and maybe it'd be frustrating, but the response is going to be, it's going to be love. And the response is going to be, proper discipline if needed, but the response is love, and we need to work through this. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's move to the other topic. A lot of people lose their way once they move out of the house, even if they're moving into a Christian school. And I don't want to go and talk about those stories, but I just want to go, what's your story? Like what has your walk been like in college? What are some of the hurdles? What are some of the things that have been working for you to be able to continue that? Broad question.
Yeah.
I am an extremely stubborn person, and that plays into this because
Wait, I'm going to act surprised. What?
Because I would see so many of my friends fall away. I was like, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm stubborn in the way that it plays into my faith, where I'm like, I am not going to allow that to happen. I'm going to be super intentional. Like, it's my second year of college, but first time like being fully away from home. And when I stepped into my dorms, and it was my first night, I'm like, okay, I am going to accept challenges. I want to wrestle and struggle with things that come up in my faith with God, and to work through those. And I'm going to be purposely intentional about the time I'm spending with him so that I don't end up falling away, because it's so easy to get caught up in the busyness of life. And then next thing you know, it's like, oh, I haven't sat down and read my Bible or prayed in like a week, and it's already affecting how you act and how you think about things. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be so intentional about this. And like, there's of course times that I fail. And I feel like another thing is finding your people. Takes some time, but who you surround yourself with makes all the difference. And I feel like I try to live by like a 3-tier rule, where you have a relationship with someone that's kind of more like a mentor, and they're a little bit further along than you are in your faith or just in life, and they're pouring into you, and you go to them for advice, and they will call you out on stuff, and they'll see things that you won't see. And then you have like the level where it's like, okay, this is the person, same age as me, same area of life. They're growing in the same ways in their faith that I'm growing in, and we can encourage each other and come alongside each other and challenge each other in that. And then you have the people where it's more, now you're the mentor to them, and they're the person that you're pouring into and trying to encourage. And if you have only one of those, I feel like it'll kind of stunt your growth as a Christian. Because if you're only ever with the people you're trying to minister to, and no one is pouring into you or calling you out on things or challenging your faith, you end up just becoming like that. You know, if you don't have someone that's a little bit older and wiser with you, then you'll just kind of stay in that same stale spot. And so in being at college, I've tried to find those people that I know are on the same level as me, that like going to those deep conversations and just challenge each other spiritually and to pray with each other. And then also this church has been a great place for me to find mentors, people that have just poured into me and loved on me and called me out on some things when I really need to be called out on it. And that honestly has helped me grow so much this year. Like, I would not be where I am today without the amazing community and friends, family, mentors that have poured into me and prayed with me and come alongside me.
How about you guys?
I think a big part of it is not coasting before you get to college in your faith. And you know, sometimes it can be a little bit easy to coast in a close community of Christians, and wherever you are, your church. It can be easy to coast when it's faith is everywhere around you. And if you are not wrestling with God and challenging these things in your faith as you're growing up, then when you go to college, that environment isn't there anymore. And then you're going to wrestle with everything all at once.
Yeah.
And you don't know how to wrestle those things either. So I think it's important, like, you know, as you're growing up, to they say you make your faith your own, but yeah, it's important to make your faith your own, to not just coast on other people. And when you're struggling with something, or like, a concept, something I don't know if this theology like in the Bible is like, that doesn't seem right, to take these things to God and to those around you, and to work some of that out before you get to college, because those questions are going to come once you get to college anyway. Like, they're going to come at some point. So yeah, if you know how to navigate that and you know how to take those things to God, I think you're going to be a lot better prepared. I would say my situation when I got to college was a little bit different than Jessa's. I felt like I was not surrounded really by any believers. Yeah. I went to school in Arizona. Nobody from my cousin was there. Yeah. I had one.
You had one.
But yeah, like, being on campus, my roommates, they're out partying and every night and stuff like that. And everybody in the whole dorm, in my dorm, is out partying every night. And so, yeah, I wasn't surrounded by those believers. But I think, an important part was I was prepared for that. If you go to it and you're not prepared, then it's not going to go as well than if you've prepared and you're ready for that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the good advice for anybody that's going to watch this, or parents of somebody, that high school is where they have to lay that foundation. High school, middle school to start. Yeah. What would you add?
I guess so. My college experience so far has kind of been a little bit all over the place. But I guess, so I was kind of in a similar situation where it was like a new school. I didn't know anyone. It was a couple of hours away from home my freshman year. And a lot of the people that I was friends with at first, and a lot of the people, some of my roommates, were not walking with the Lord. So it really was not a challenge. Well, I wasn't being challenged spiritually. And if it had stayed that way, like I was, like waking up early, reading my Bible, doing my Bible study, and going to BCM and being like, okay, like I'm learning about God. I'm following him, like feeling like good about, like I've transitioned to college. I've found ministries to be a part of, and I'm doing these things on my own accord. And so that felt good. But then I started going to a church, and it was a satellite church. And I got there like 5 minutes before it started and like left a minute afterwards. And I was just like, this is okay. Like, I don't, like in my heart, I was like, I don't need to know anyone. It's like, I'm only here for 4 years. Like, I'll come home to this church. It'll be fine. And then someone reached out to me, and it was someone from the church that I had connected with. And they said, hey, we have a college group that, like, if you want to get involved, like, just let me know. And I was like, just kind of brushed it off. I was like, sure, whatever. Like, I'll get to that. And then like a couple days later, I got a text, and it was like from a friend of mine. She was like, I'm leaving for group in 10 minutes. Come with me. I was like, okay, I guess I'm going. And so then I went, and it was just a group of maybe like 10 of us. And it was at someone's house, and then met with like the leader. And then later that week, she asked me if I wanted to just go talk with her, like go get lunch, go talk with her. And that was one of like the biggest things like spiritually in that season, where if I hadn't had that person reach out and intentionally want to be like, I want to minister to you. I want to talk about things with you. I want to know you. And that was absolutely huge. And so, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is one of the biggest things about like making your faith your own and like keeping the faith, like when you're in college, in my experience, has been just finding people who are willing to challenge you and willing to know who you are and willing to talk with you about, like we talked, I had known her for like a week and we're in the car eating Taco Bell, and all of a sudden I'm telling her like the deepest, darkest parts of my testimony, like all this crazy stuff. But that was so redeeming in a way, like going back to like the experience of just like not wanting to be like keeping all these things under wraps. It was just so cool to have that. And so obviously I'm not at that school anymore. And I've definitely felt God leading me out of that after a while. And then having, like being here, having the young adults group, and there's some women that I meet with every once in a while just to talk. They're older than me, have experienced more in their walk with the Lord. And that's been the biggest thing for me, is just having people to be alongside you and not trying to go at it by myself.
Yeah.
Because that's such a big part of walking with the Lord, is that he oftentimes uses other people to speak to you. And so that's been the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, that's good. We were not meant to walk alone in this journey. Mm-hmm. I love, each of you have contributed to some really cool things. And as I think this through, is like good encouragement for folks is, it starts with what you were saying, Jayce, is don't coast through middle school and high school in your faith. It's like, you have to have a foundation, and without that foundation, you're going to fail. And then all you guys hit on this piece of, we don't do this alone. And we don't do it alone. Even though we don't do it alone, so we start to develop community, but even that community needs to be intentional. Mm-hmm. It's not just peers, it's folks that have been down the road a little bit, and it's even pouring into other folks. And those are good, because as I think about it, it's like that is and this is true for everybody, but I think of just being at college, it's just so easy to be alone and busy and just miss so much. And that doesn't lead to healthy places. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on that?
Humility, I think, is really big. And all the times I've grown the most, it was when God broke me and humbled me and showed me, oh, I really do struggle with that. And I never realized it. I got to give that up to the Lord. And even realizing I can't do it. Literally all I can do is pray and spend time with God, and he'll slowly grow me and change me. Like, that's not anything that I'm doing. Like, it changed my perspective. Like, instead of praying more on like outward things, like God, like change this and change that and change that, it's like, Lord, just change my heart so that I can seek you. Yeah. Change, work in me and like grow me. Don't, like, not so much the circumstances, but more like change my heart so that I can accept what it is that you have for me. I feel like has been a huge shift. And I have never noticed more how God is working around me than when I started like journaling my prayers. I never really realized how God worked, or like things that he was doing in my life and other people's lives, until I started keeping track of all the things I was praying for, and for myself and for other people. And now I have like a roadmap to look back on of how God has worked. I'm like, oh my goodness, he was faithful there, and he answered that prayer. And I didn't even see how I've been praying for this one thing for like 3 months, and God has like slowly grown that attribute in me. And it's like, now I'm looking for it. I'm like, oh, what is God going to do this week? Like, how can I see him at work? How can I pray? How can I don't know. That's a huge perspective shift for me. And for the first few months of college, I was alone. I isolated, and I was alone and busy, and it was not good. It wasn't until I was broken that I started to actually grow and seek all of those good things out.
Yeah. Those are good words.
Yeah.
Anything you guys add?
Yeah, you mentioned like being alone and busy. And I think something that I'm still kind of learning is like the importance of just like having discipline in that time. And for me, like, I hate to say it, but like having somewhat of a schedule.
Yeah.
Cause I don't know, for a long time, my philosophy has been like, I'm at my best spiritually when I'm just doing it like in my free time, and like, you know, and I'm just pursuing
In the
it.
moment. And
In the moment. And like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, that's like my best time when I, you know, I have a free hour and then I spend that hour with the Lord. I'm like, that's the best time. But then, you know, when I'm so busy and that free hour doesn't come along very often, then I need to have some kind of schedule, because if that's my only plan, then it doesn't happen. So I'm learning to try and introduce some schedule and discipline in that aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's important when you're busy.
My smirk wasn't me going, oh, that's true for you. My smirk is, it was a revelation for me in my late 30s that I realized structure was such a blessing. And because for me, structure was always jail. It was always this hard thing. Impulsiveness was, you know, let's do that. But the reality, there was a shift in my late 30s where I was like, wait a minute, when I have structure, everything is better for me. My marriage is better. My walk with my kids is better. My walk with God is better. And it's still my struggle. So I don't want to say that to discourage you, that it could be this lifelong journey, but how great it is that you are doing this at your age and not your late 30s when you're married with kids going, I've been fighting this my whole life.
Well, we'll see if I get there or not.
There you go.
I feel like too much structure can be bad too.
Yeah,
I feel
everything
like that's my thing.
requires
I need
balance.
to
Happy
relax
Yeah.
more and be open for when God's like, no, you're going to spend an hour talking with this person and you're not going to do the thing you planned. And that's what I want for you.
You
trying to
were our
relax.
one kid that we'd be like, I really just want you to ditch school once. Just do it. Have a good day.
I still have not yet done
I never
that.
said that to
I
Jayce.
really should, but
Yeah. Well, I am grateful for you guys, for your testimony of, it's often not easy to be the pastor's kid, and you guys have handled that with grace, and sure, we all fall down, but, very proud of all of you guys, and it is a pleasure and it's a blessing to me to know you and to see you, doing what you guys do. And, as we wrap up, any final words of encouragement that you might give to either ministry kids or just college friends, fellow laborers? What would you?
You go. No, you go. I'm still thinking.
something that has come up a lot like the past few weeks is how important it is to obey. And Jesus completely obeyed God, but he suffered the most because he obeyed. And it's like obeying God means you have to lay yourself down. And like, while there are like dreams and desires that God has put in my heart for a reason, that he will use and fulfill that in the best way than I could ever imagine. But it's like constantly the death to self. I've never realized that more than being in college, when I'm like, oh, okay, this is not what I want, but this is what God has for me. How can I seek him and submit to him? And that's a every day, every second, every minute decision where it's like, okay, Lord, you know best. Yeah. And that's really hard, but that's something that I feel like God has been teaching me the past few weeks.
Yeah, that's good.
I guess I would say for ministry families, pastors, kids, that something that I've learned after a while is that, like, yeah, there's times where it's stressful and seems like a lot and seems really heavy, but there's also like moments of really amazing joy.
Yeah.
In ministry and your relationships with others, it's like there might be times where it seems like it's like wondering if it's worth it, but it can still be good.
Yeah. As you started telling stories at the beginning, it just made me smile thinking about my kids, and it's like, what a cool thing it is that to grow up and your home, your safe place is this whole church.
Yeah.
Or wherever it is. And it's like that was always fun. Even as a parent, that was fun for me, for you guys to show up at our youth building and it was your playground. And it wasn't just that, but you peripherally, sometimes directly, you guys are seeing ministry happen. You're seeing what it looks like to love people and to love God. And you're right. It's like, what a blessing that is. So there is sacrifice, there is stress and pressure and stuff, but what a huge blessing that is. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Thank you guys. Short conversation, but good conversation. I think it was valuable and I think it can be a good encouragement for others. And we love our pastor's kids. So thanks.